Folie Douce West Island. Today our show is on the subject of women and mental health. In a few seconds you will hear a brief overview of the history of women and mental health by Joel. It will be followed by an interview with Lysane Blanchette-Lamothe, federal MP in the West Island, by Michael Miller. In the second part of the show we will hear an interview in French of Emmanuelle Morin, clinical supervisor at PCSM, by Michael Miller. And then we will close the show with our round table by Joel on the subject of women and mental health. Stay tuned for a great show.
You're tuned to Folie Douce West Island, a show whose goal is to change negative perceptions of the world of mental health.
Throughout history, women as the quote-unquote weaker sex have been considered to be more susceptible to mental illness or emotional breakdowns than men. Many feel that existing stereotypes, as well as our patriarchal society, have contributed to the belief that women are more fragile and somehow mentally weaker. Prior to the middle 1800s, women who suffered from depression or mental illness were believed to have a disease in their soul. In other words, a form of evil for which there was no help or solution. These women were committed to insane asylums and often treated worse than animals, being kept in cages and kept in filth, given limited amounts of food, and often had little or no human contact. Finally, reform came and beliefs very slowly began to change regarding the mentally ill. Those who suffered from severe depression or other forms of mental illness were no longer believed to suffer simply because God ordered it, but because of a diseased brain which could often be cured or at least treated. Today's society often sees women who suffer from depression due to a focus on the overall meaning of their lives and their importance in the world. Although nearly twice as many women as men will be diagnosed with depression, it is generally to be considered a byproduct of low social status, the legal and economical discrimination of women, and traditional role expectations. Thank goodness the treatments have come a long way through the years, and women's depression in particular is both more widely understood and more widely accepted. Mental illnesses affecting women and men differently. Some disorders are more common in women and some express themselves with different symptoms. Scientists are only now beginning to tease apart the contributions of various biological and psychosocial factors to mental health and mental illness in both women and men. In addition, researchers are currently studying the special problems of treatment for serious mental illness during pregnancy and the postpartum period. The mental disorders affecting women include the following: anxiety disorders, including OCD, panic, PTSD, social phobia, and generalized anxiety disorders, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, depression, postpartum depression, eating disorders, and schizophrenia. Social inequality has damaging consequences for the mental and emotional well-being of women. Throughout their lives, women may be considered at risk of developing emotional problems due to a host of social factors. Limited participation in public life, restricted decision-making, devalued role expectations, poverty, violence, and sexual abuse undermine the potential for emotional well-being. Social change is needed to strengthen the emotional well-being of women individually and collectively in society.
Hi, my name is Michael Miller. I am pleased to welcome Lysane Blanchette-Lamothe, Member of Parliament for Pierrefonds-Dollard at the federal level since 2011. Welcome, Lysane.
Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me.
Yes. So, to start off with, I believe you were a community worker?
Yes, exactly. Before being an MP, I was a community worker in a community organization that was fighting against poverty. Oh. And so in that work that I was doing, I was often working with people who were facing mental health issues, because we often see that poverty and mental health can be related, not necessarily, but can be. Yeah. And so we were working in the community on that level. I learned a lot while I was doing that work.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I have to say, I kind of like the NDP. Like, I kind of tend towards that because of the social awareness, and I think that's something that perhaps drew you to the party. Is that possible?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah.
My interest and my concerns for all social programs and social support that governments in different levels are offering or are cutting into.
Yes,
and
yes.
that kind of interest brought me in politics, and specifically with the NDP. You're right.
Yes. So, yeah, talking about the federal programs, what kind of programs would there be for mental health in general, or for even women, to be specific? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, healthcare or health is generally a more provincial jurisdiction, right? It is managed by the provincial, but the federal has a role in terms of leadership and in terms of transfer, the money the federal give to the provinces for them to realize some projects or put in place some services. So there was recently a project announced by the government on mental health, trying to raise awareness, because we know that one of the big issues in mental health is the prejudices or the bad impressions people can have about mental health, and it even make a lot of people don't seek for the help they would be they would benefit from. So we know that maybe approximately 2 in 3 Canadians don't seek the help they would need.
Yes, that's true.
Because of those prejudices. So that's one of the things the federal is doing. There's a lot of challenges that the federal can address differently. For example, making sure that the services are more accessible. When we think about Canadian forces, for example, and veterans, we see that there is a big need there, and the services are not always available for them. When we think about northern communities and Aboriginal Inuit Métis communities, we also know that there is some specific important needs in those communities, and we need to look for better ways to make sure services are available to them, because they are often far from the services that can be offered. So those kind of challenges federal governments still have to deal with, I think.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I have family members that are both working with Aboriginal communities, and that's my dad, and my stepfather actually is working, he's a padre in the forces right now. So he's on the front lines with the mental health. And so these are very interesting topics. Like, I know it's in the news, like the suicide and the soldiers and the mental health, that they need, like the support they need to when they come back from Afghanistan or wherever, the support they need for their mental health.
Exactly.
Yeah. How do you manage your stress with the there must be a lot of things that you have to do, a very busy schedule. How do you personally deal with those issues? Yeah.
Well, excellent questions when we're talking about stigma around mental health. I want to say that I have personally few colleagues around me, MPs, Member of Parliament, who faced mental health since the last years because of all the stress they are living in their work conditions. And that's something we see often. So there's no exclusion. Everyone can be affected by mental health. Personally, I try to keep near from my friends, family, husband, and try to remember that my work is something important, but I also have some very important things beside the work. So when things are are difficult, I remember that I have people who love me and are there for me, and my life is not only my work. Another thing that helped me a lot is that I try to remember my successes. So I always keep in mind few of my best successes. So when I have difficult time in my work, I remember that sometimes, not always, but sometimes I can help people, I can make a difference, and that helped me to continue and get rid of the stress. But it's often that we see member of parliaments facing mental health issues because of their workplace and the way they manage the stress.
Yeah. Do you find Parliament itself is a bit of a conflicted, like there's a lot of conflict perhaps, like people on different points and, butting heads and things like that, like...
Exactly. Yes, certainly.
Yeah.
And also with the media, it's not always easy to face the medias and to deal with them. There's often also, what can I say, the media, you have to work, sometimes as a young or as a woman, you have to work twice harder to prove that you even just deserve your place in the parliament.
Yeah.
It's not always easy to show that you deserve the respect and you deserve the floor and you deserve to be heard as the representative of a community when you're young or when you're a woman or when you're a visible minority, for example. So it's a difficult world. It's a place where you need to prove yourself every day, every second, and you cannot make mistakes. You need to be perfect always, and so that's another stress.
That sounds like a challenge.
We're not, of course, but
No.
we try to be because when there's a camera on, you cannot go back. It's when it's public, you need to be very careful, right?
Yeah, of course. So I see that you're busy. I mean, you're doing all kinds of things with cultural communities, like whether it's the Sikhs. I saw that on your Facebook page you sent out greetings to the Sikhs and also to the Jewish community for Passover, and so I find you're very inclusive and that's important. I think your husband even also is from a cultural community.
Yes,
is that
my
right?
husband is an immigrant. He's now newly Canadian, but he's from Colombia.
Oh,
and
Colombia.
so,
Okay.
but I grew up here in the West Island, so diversity is part of my background. It's part of what I grew up in. So I think, but yes, it's an important thing for me. You're right.
Yes, the cultural diversity. Yeah. So, well, I thank you so much for being with us today. And yes, any final thoughts on mental health and women that you might want to share?
I think you talk often about it in your shows, but we have to break down the stigmas. We have to make sure that people knows 1 Canadian on 5 is affected or experiences mental health. So let's break out silence and stigma, and let's make sure people are comfortable to go to the resources, because that's how we will really be able to make a difference. So thank you very much for your show. I think it's a very important one.
Yes, well, thank you so much, and thanks, and all the best in your future projects for everything. And I thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Pleasure is mine.
Bonjour, je suis avec Emmanuelle Morin, superviseur clinique à perspective communautaire. Bonjour Emmanuelle.
Bonjour Mike, merci de m'avoir invité. Ça fait plaisir de venir discuter d'un sujet qui me tient à cœur beaucoup. Écoute, quand tu m'es arrivé avec le fait de « Oh, viens parler de santé mentale », santé mentale, pour moi, c'est tellement large. C'est comme si tu me dirais comme ça, OK, santé physique, c'est juste qu'on ne le voit pas. Donc, les gens restent souvent c'est quoi, ils ne comprennent pas, ou bien... Écoute, on a fait pas mal de chemin, je suis d'accord, puis aujourd'hui, en 2014, il y a beaucoup de services, mais il y a place à l'amélioration encore, parce que les préjugés sont encore là. Puis surtout, avec la société nord-américaine, on voit vraiment qu'on alimente ce discours-là d'exclure, dès qu'on sort de notre petit rendez-vous avec le psychiatre, on a notre petite prescription, puis là, c'est comme, on a une nouvelle étiquette et une nouvelle identité. Il faut sortir de ça.
Tout le monde est une personne, c'est pas C'est pas une maladie, c'est la personne. Oui.
Exactement. Faut voir le fait que malgré cette difficulté-là qu'on vient de nous dénoncer ou attribuer ou quoi que ce soit, bien que j'ai encore des besoins, j'ai encore des émotions, puis j'ai encore le goût de m'actualiser. Donc, il faut garder en tête que je ne suis pas ce diagnostic-là. Okay? Je suis bien plus. Je suis a priori cette femme, cette sœur, cette fille, cette amie, cette patronne, cette écrivaine qui veut vraiment se réaliser. Donc, il faut arrêter de nous mettre à l'écart et puis vraiment plus nous offrir un support. Je te donne un exemple. Admettons que je commence à avoir des difficultés au travail. Bien, généralement, l'employeur, ce qu'il fait, c'est qu'il me rencontre, puis là, il me dit, bien là, tu prends un petit congé, hein, va te soigner.
OK, oui.
À la place de m'offrir du support, peut-être que ça me ferait du bien de continuer de me sentir, tu sais, dans l'action, puis d'être productive, puis tout ça, mais avec un support au travail. Sauf que, eh bien, ça coûte cher, ça.
Oui, oui.
Donc, c'est plus facile de mettre la petite virgule, puis dire, va te soigner, puis tu reviendras. Donc, tout ce qui est pas l'habitude, ben on appelle ça pas normal, puis on tasse ça de côté. Puis c'est pour toutes les difficultés, quand on regarde les déficits intellectuels, l'autisme, ou, tu sais, on a tendance à faire ça. Donc, c'est un problème de société, a priori, à mon avis.
Et ce serait quoi d'abord les défis particuliers pour les femmes, pour la santé mentale des femmes?
Bien, c'est ça. C'est au niveau, comme je disais, l'exclusion, de faire face à cette exclusion-là, puis de continuer à me battre contre ça continuellement. Je me bats pour avoir des services, je me bats pour avoir mon chèque. Écoute, parce que c'est des conditions exécrables. Si le moindrement, j'avais pas un bon salaire ou je viens pas d'une bonne boîte, bien là, c'est signe de pauvreté, là.
Mais en général, si on a un problème de santé mentale, on ne peut pas travailler, parfois un peu, mais parfois on a beaucoup de temps, on a des difficultés. Et alors ça, on a besoin d'un chèque. Ça, c'est pour les hommes et les femmes également, c'est ça? Oui,
sauf que la femme, c'est souvent parce que la femme doit continuer son rôle. C'est une maman, a priori. Il faut qu'elle continue d'élever des enfants. Il faut qu'elle continue à faire le ménage, sinon il ne se fait pas. Il faut qu'elle continue à être une femme à son mari. C'est ça l'affaire. C'est bien beau, je reçois l'étiquette, mais je dois continuer à être productive sans l'aide parce que je n'ai pas les mêmes ressources financières, parce que sans argent, ça ne fonctionne pas. Puis quand je parlais d'une grosse boîte, parce qu'au moins dans la grosse boîte, j'ai des belles assurances, mais c'est pas tout le monde qui a ça. La réalité est fait en sorte que là, ben, OK, un bout de temps, je reçois, tu sais, du dédommagement, mais par la suite, on sait très bien que sur l'aide sociale, ben ouf, mon Dieu, je suis pas une grosse débarque. Je mange pas beaucoup, là.
Non.
Mais il faut que je continue à faire vivre ma famille et ainsi de suite.
Et parfois, on est comme mère unique, c'est ça?
Oui.
On n'a pas de ça
conjoint.
Peut arriver. Et on est pauvre, on a des enfants, on a des problèmes de santé mentale. Alors, ça peut être vraiment une situation où on a besoin de beaucoup de support.
Ben oui, parce que là, la femme, elle voit comme ça, ben là, vous me demandez tant, mais je suis pas capable. Donc, tu sais, là, j'ai le mot en anglais, mais self-esteem prend une débarque.
Oui. Estime de soi, c'est ça.
L'estime de soi prend une grosse débarque. Oui. Donc, je me sens diminuée parce que il faut cette affaire de productivité que la société nous demande sans cesse. Qui fait en sorte que c'est trop, là. Donc, par contre, quand on a le support, ben là, c'est plus facile. C'est pas évident, c'est sûr, mais faut aller chercher ce support-là. Puis, plus on en a, mieux c'est.
Alors, ça serait quoi les services spécialisés disponibles pour les femmes ou les supports qu'on a dans la société? Bien,
nous, dans l'ouest de l'île, on est quand même assez chanceux. Il y a beaucoup de services pour les femmes. Il y a le centre des femmes où la femme peut avoir une panoplie d'activités, une panoplie d'ateliers pour se ressourcer. Une femme qui est en difficulté avec ou sans enfant, on a un refuge pour les femmes.
Oui.
Alors que les hommes ne l'ont pas.
Non.
Eux autres, ils doivent aller jusqu'à Montréal. Tu sais. Il y a, si j'ai un problème au niveau de l'alimentation, soit un trouble alimentaire, anorexie, boulimie, ben il y a la NEB C'est sûr que cette ressource-là est également offerte aux hommes, mais qui fréquente plus, ce sont les femmes.
Oui, oui.
Il y a CALAC également pour les agressions sexuelles dont les femmes peuvent bénéficier ici dans l'ouest de l'île. SOS violence conjugale, on connaît bien. Il y a également, quand on n'a pas de sous, ce qui est le fun, c'est il y a la clinique juridique du Y. Donc, si j'ai 5 $ ou 10 $, ben, je peux, parce que des fois, c'est le divorce, c'est une panoplie de choses, mais aller se trouver un avocat, c'est pas évident. Ou bien quand on a des questions, donc pour me rassurer. Donc, il y a cette ressource-là qui existe.
Excellent.
Puis, c'est pas le fait qu'il y a plus de femmes qui ont le fameux diagnostic. C'est juste que les femmes vont aller chercher l'aide plus que les hommes. Maintenant, on commence à voir que les hommes commencent à cogner aux portes.
Oui.
Sauf que nous, les femmes, c'est dans notre nature. On a un problème, on appelle une amie.
Oui. Les gars, c'est peut-être ils se renferment, sont plus communicatives, les femmes, en général. On peut dire.
Exactement. Oui, de façon générale, beaucoup plus, parce que c'est ancré dans notre éducation.
Oui.
Une femme, ben c'est ça, on parle, tandis qu'un homme, quand il y a de la peine ou quoi que ce soit, qu'est-ce qu'on lui dit? Ben pleure pas, tu sais, t'es assez fort.
Oui, les gars, c'était fort, oui.
Exactement.
Ouais.
Donc, montrer ses émotions, c'est comment? Il n'est pas trop habitué. Donc, une fois à l'âge adulte, ou même avant, c'est pas évident. Puis en parler, ben généralement l'homme, ben lui il attend qu'il soit au bout du rouleau, tandis que nous, ben oui, on va aller cogner aux portes quand on trouve.
Mais
que...
c'est bon c'est un bon aspect des femmes, on peut dire. Oui.
Oui, mais ça c'est connu. Même quand on regarde dans les pays sous-développés, il y a ce rassemblement là de femmes qui se fait. C'est automatique, puis on s'entraide comme ça. Donc c'est pas nécessairement des ressources comme un psychologue ou quoi que ce soit. C'est que il va y avoir quelqu'un du quartier qui va venir garder mon enfant alors que moi je suis plus capable ou je suis au bout du rouleau ou quoi que ce soit. Donc il y a des ressources, mais il s'agit d'aller les chercher.
OK, parfait. Ben merci beaucoup Emmanuelle d'être avec nous. Et c'était vraiment intéressant. Merci beaucoup. Ça donne beaucoup d'idées intéressantes. Alors, je te souhaite tout le meilleur chose dans le futur.
Ben, merci beaucoup pour l'invitation. Puis comme je dis, il ne faut pas se limiter à ces quelques propos parce que c'est tellement large. Je n'ai tellement à dire, mais on est limité dans le temps. Donc, merci. Puis
bienvenue,
au plaisir.
Merci à toi.
Folie Douce West Island, providing valuable information on the world of mental health.
Hello, my name is Joel McCuaig, and with me on the program today, we have a panel of ladies. We have Rachel, we have Vanessa, and we have Nancy. Now, Rachel and Vanessa are workers here at Community Perspective. Nancy is a client. And what we're going to try to do today is try to get as many viewpoints on mental health, both from a worker's perspective and from a client's perspective. So without further ado, let's get into the first question. Mental health services, specifically the emotional aspect thereof. There's a lot more resources for women than there are for men. I only mentioned the men for the contrast, but we want to hear about what is available to them from the worker's perspective, and I'd like to also know from the client's perspective, going to look for and using these resources. So I'll leave it open to whoever wants to start.
Yeah, but I agree that's maybe more like women's shelters, but I would say that it's open for both, for female and male. But it's just maybe different the way the male will express their emotions. But I would suggest strongly for men to open something for them, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. Anybody else want to say anything about this?
Well, one discovery that I recently made was the Women's Center, the West Island Women's Center. And, that's for all women on the West Island, not just for women in mental health. I feel sad that there's not something like that for men, on the coast. But at the same time, very happy that this is another resource that I can refer some of my clients to.
I have heard of the West Island Women's Shelter, and my friend
Center.
And
Yeah.
my friend Anne, she suffers from mental health problems, and she goes there. She takes art courses and French and different kinds of
Yeah.
things. And you do have to pay for the services, but she finds it really helps out her mental health.
Yeah, they said that they will waive the fee if you're on disability assistance or social assistance, so it's very affordable.
Okay.
And me personally, what I do is I go to Lake Entreprise and I work. And I find that when I go there, it builds up my confidence and my self-esteem. And I also find it's a lot of fun to go work there. Like you're not judged for your mental illness, and they don't make the work very hard for you to do either, so that makes it easier. And they only make you work like a couple of hours.
Yeah. They ease you into it.
They ease you into it, and what they give you something very easy to do, like chopping vegetables or making a dessert. Or
something to do it at your own pace. Okay, so the next one is going to be directed at the two workers here. Are there issues with your female clients that you don't particularly see in the male clients, or are they the same issue and they're not quite the same? Is it easier to talk about emotions with the women than it is with the men?
I don't know you, Rachel, but it's very different with the male and the female. It's not the same way you're going to abort it or they're going to express it. That's for sure. The approach will be different.
Well, I find a lot of female clients specifically request a female worker because they've had past issues of abuse and trauma with men in their lives. So, you know, I feel that is that's one of the main sources of their mental illness, I think, is their trauma in the past.
Okay. Yeah. So would you say that, well, I'm going to direct this at Nancy, actually. As a client, as someone who uses the services, do you feel that these services, they benefit you? Well, you would feel comfortable referring these services to other women. Would you also refer these services if they are open to men as well? Like they could be equal opportunity?
Well, Lake Entreprise is actually available for men also. I believe also that Centre Bienvenue is available for men, and also Perspective Communautaire en Santé Mentale is available for men. I do feel, though, that there should be more services for men.
So, as a client, what are your thoughts on mental health and how you go about your day-to-day business of, with your mental health and whatnot? Have you learned to cope with it? Is it easier for you now because you're using the resources?
I do find that since I use the resources, life is a lot easier. I can turn to people, and I can share my feelings, and
okay. And for the two workers here, Rachel and Vanessa, would you say that the services that women have to use and the clients that you have that are female that use these services, had their progress come a lot faster, and their road to from where they were to where they are now was, I'm not going to say necessarily smooth, but was it easier transition than, say, someone who's reluctant to use the services?
I would say most definitely.
Yes.
Yeah. Breaking isolation and finding a sense of community and a sense of purpose. Like Nancy said about a Cape Entreprise, I've just heard great things about Cape Entreprise from people that work there. They love it.
Okay, so I'm going to open the floor to the three of you. We've got about 3 minutes left, and I thought it would be nice for you guys to give your thoughts on what you think of the status of mental health in general, if there's anything that you want our audience to know about. And so I'll leave the floor open to you guys.
I know that there are a lot of people who do suffer from mental health problems, such as schizophrenia, bipolar, borderline personality disorder, and I find that when you're active, when you have mental illness, it makes you feel better instead of, you know, just sitting around and like doing nothing all day, and I find it's even good to just go out sometimes, you know, and have a coffee or go for a nice long walk or.
Okay. And is there anything you'd like the clients to know from the workers' perspective?
Mostly, what I wanted to add with what Nancy said is that for people in the society, just to be more open, you know, compare it like a diabetes illness, but it's harder for people because it's not visible. So
we still need to talk about it, and what you're doing is extremely helpful because we're just constantly having to break down the stigma and educate people.
Absolutely.
Well, on behalf of the team, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And I would agree with you that more needs to be talked about. That's the reason we do what we do. So I'd like to thank you ladies, for joining us today and giving us your opinions and whatnot.
Nice to be here, and it was a pleasure being on your show. I love it, and keep on going.
Yes, it was a pleasure for me too. Keep on going.
Thanks for having me here today.
Well, thank you, ladies, for being here today.
That's it for our show today, Just for Women. I'd like to thank Michael Miller. Thank you, Michael.
Yes, thank you, Randy. I'd like to thank also my guests, Madame Lysane Blanchette-Lamothe and Emmanuelle Morin.
Joel McCuaig. Thank you, Joel.
I'd like to thank Vanessa, Rachel, and Nancy, three women on the round table. Thank you, and see you next time.
And Yvan Bujold for producing the show. Patrick Merrigan for coaching of the team. This is Randall Hague saying goodbye from us.